Hello, and welcome to Life of a Wizard by Mike Walter, Part 2, where Helena the Goblin is heading toward Tarnasa to become a wizard. Let us begin. The trip to Tarnasa went well. I spent the first day as a tourist, just seeing the sights. King Norbert and Queen Audrey's castle was impressive. I stared up at the towers, hoping to catch a glimpse of Prince Gareth, who was now 25, or Princess Emily, who was 2 years younger. I didn't see any royalty that day. I thought I was going to have trouble with the city guard at first, but besides them keeping a close eye on me, there was no difficulty. The next morning, I went to the academy. This was where all of the great mages had learned their skills, including the royal advisor, Frolladin. The academy was financed by the Mage Guild, which was nice since it meant I didn't have to pay anything. I stood at the entrance to the academy, uncertain as how to proceed. "Why have you come?" The voice came from a little old man, sitting on a rock next to the doors leading into the academy. He was very small, and his bald head made him seem vulnerable. "Who are you?" I asked. "I am Master Durgan, the doorkeeper to the academy. Why have you come?" I told him that I wanted to learn everything. He nodded wisely. "A well-rounded education is important for a wizard. Magical knowledge is important, but the other disciplines will be invaluable." He smiled warmly at me and led me to the testing chamber. Master Durgan placed his hands on my head and concentrated. After a few moments, he nodded his bald head in approval. "Yes, the spark is within you. Welcome to the academy." "Doesn't it bother you that I'm a goblin?" I asked Master Durgan. "You seem different to me," he said honestly. "More importantly, you have the spark. It would be very nice to have a goblin graduate from the academy for the first time." I was given a room in the academy which included a bed, a desk, and a chair. It was very sparse, but it was my own. I was also given a schedule of classes. My training as a wizard had begun. Although I learned many things at the academy, my favorite class was divination. Looking into the future, diviners are highly sought after individuals. They are able to sway entire battles with their supernatural knowledge, and yes, I was pretty good at it. I was on the road to becoming a diviner. My classes went well as I began to learn the arcane arts. I was amazed on how tolerant everyone was to me, considering my unique features as a goblin. It was a lot of work reading ancient tombs and trying to force mystical energies to do as I wished. I learned a little bit of everything that I was taught during my time at the academy. I made a friend. He was also a student. His name was Dominic. He was a dwarf. I was surprised that I could find it in my heart to befriend a dwarf after what they had done to my village, but I couldn't blame Dominic for what his people had done. Racial diversity was even more prominent in the capital city of Tornasa, especially at the academy. Even so, it still seemed unbelievable to me that a goblin could become friends with a dwarf. It was wonderful. I learned a lot about his culture. We met in transmutation class. We got to talking, and it turned out his big passion was sword fighting. Dominic knew a lot of styles and moves. Some of the other students found it funny that Dominic continued this hobby at the academy, even though it seemed very unwizardly. I was talked into sparring a few times, although I usually lost. This practice did make me get better over time. My summoning class was always interesting. We learned to create protective circles and to bring forth all kinds of animals, demons, and elementals from various planes. It was important to maintain control of the creatures that were summoned. I had really difficult summoning assignment during my first year. I cheated by using Shadow, my dog. I said a bunch of mumbo jumbo, then Shadow jumped up out from under my desk. My teacher was quite impressed with the way I could make the dog do whatever I told it. I passed with a really good grade. I actually learned a bit of summoning too, as I had to know exactly how a summoned creature would act. Dominic and I spent a lot of time together. It was nice to have a friend at the academy. We started a business to earn some extra money. Although the Mages Guild is paying for our room and board, it was nice to have some extra money. We started a small business. We opened a store for students. Since we were students ourselves, we knew what other students wanted. We had regular things like extra paper, better pens, and school supplies, but we also had sweets, snacks, games, and certain recreational items. One of the new subjects that we had to study at the academy was Arcana. This included everything from the theory of magic to magical artifacts. We learned about the nature of reality and how our mystical energies were able to change the very fabric of existence. A fifth-year student sold me a potion that helped me concentrate better in class. The potion kept me awake and focused, allowing me to take better notes and study longer. I learned a lot of Arcana, but when I ran out of the potion, I was sick for weeks. It was during my second year at the academy that I had my big divination test. We were given a blank piece of paper and told to write down the answer. Our task was to use our magic to divine what the question was. Divination was my favorite course. I did great in it. I had a dream about the test the night before. I knew that the answer was 7. It wasn't even a surprise pop quiz to me since I had been forewarned by my magic. My teacher was so impressed with my work that she gave me a crystal ball of my very own. It made me a great medium for advanced work. I really enjoyed the class because I got to look into all sorts of details about the past. The academy was filled with young men and women who were filled with hopes and dreams. Despite the fact we were studying knowledge that seemed better suited to older people, we still acted like kids sometimes. I met an attractive girl in my second year. Her name was Rosie. Rosie was an elf. I wasn't surprised that I hadn't found a goblin like myself to fall in love with. We were considered monsters after all. I was glad that Rosie didn't see me that way. I felt myself thinking about her eyes while meditating in divination class, or wondering what it would be like to kiss her lips when I should have been practicing my conjuring. We started dating. It was a romantic place to court someone. We spent nights in the Diviner's Tower watching the stars, and we spent days watching the illusionists practice their craft. There was always something interesting to do or to see. Even in a city as big as Tornasa, a goblin dating an elf turned heads. I found her pointed ears very appealing. I really enjoyed her company. Our relationship remained chaste, and we did no more than kiss. We were a nice couple. We did fun things together, but we spent our nights in our own rooms. My alchemy class involved a lot of memorization. I had to know what each ingredient did, how they reacted to each other, and what type of incantation would make each potion stable. There was a very difficult project that year. I borrowed a potion from Dominic, handing it in as my own. I brewed some nonsense potion, but when it came to bottle our creations, I used the potion that Dominic had made instead of my own. It was close, as his potion skills weren't much better than my own, but it was enough, and we both passed. There was a terrible accident in my transmutation class at the beginning of my third year. We were taking turns working on a standard spell when a young red-haired boy's magic went wild. The walls turned translucent and then shiny as the brick turned to glass. A loud crack silenced everyone in the room, but there was no time to think before the roof came crashing down upon us. Many students were badly injured from the flying glass and the falling stone. I was able to help out a little bit. I knew a little bit about healing and was able to help a few students with their wounds. Unfortunately, one student still died in the accident, although it was still a good thing I was there. I remember the day I heard a knock upon my door. Robin came to visit. It was nice to see Robin again. I was really happy about her visit. I introduced my childhood friend, Dominic, and the three of us had a great time. I was fortunate to have so many friends. It turned out that Robin had become a horse trainer. Blaze was trained during her visit. My conjuration class was very practical. We learned to throw fire and create magical shields for combat, casting, and dueling. I still won my fair share of duels since I knew how to fight. The trick was to rush my opponent and interrupt their casting. Once I did that, I had more time to cast my own offensive spells. My teacher gave me many texts by other wizards who had fought the same way. I was beginning to learn that the academy was a very dangerous place. I had made it to my 4th year. I was becoming less concerned with the graduation rate and more ill at ease with the survival rate. Another accident took place in my summoning class. Some student had gained access to Archmage's personal library and learned a spell that they couldn't control. I filed that thought away for later. The idea that extra powerful toons were kept apart was very interesting. The spell began normally, as the student made the necessary gestures and said the needed magic words. Unfortunately, he missed a key component to the spell, and the snakes he summoned were out of his control. To make matters worse, they were poisonous and extremely aggressive. They immediately began to attack everyone in sight. Several of the snakes bit me. There wasn't much I could do since they seemed to be everywhere at once. I was bitten all over and woke up in the infirmary several days later. I felt weak and shaken. It took a toll on my body. My enchantment exam was very interesting. The academy hired a man from a nearby town for us to work our magic on. He stood in front of the class, and we were told to use our enchanting spells to make him do what we wanted. I bribed him 100 gold to do what I told him to do. It was easier than you might suspect. All I had to do was give him 100 gold when the teacher wasn't looking. After that, he did everything I told him. The teacher was very impressed with how much control I had over the man. She told me that it was okay if I stopped doing some of the enchanting homeworks she was giving me, allowing me time to work on my other subjects. I remember that fateful day in my 4th year, when all the classes were cancelled. Good King Norbert had died, and Prince Gareth, who was 28 years old at the time, was to be our new king. All of the wizards of the academy gathered for the coronation ceremony. The royal wizard Fraladin smiled at the students from his place of honor near the prince and princess. He held his gnarled wooden staff in his hands and smiled through his thick white beard. King Norbert's widow, Queen Audrey, looked very sad. She had obviously loved her husband very much. Princess Emily looked very sad as well. Her lightly curled brown hair lay across her shoulders, and her deep brown eyes had a shine to them that showed she had been crying. Prince Gareth seemed eager to assume the crown, his dark gaze never leaving the official who was conducting the coronation. After the ceremony, the festivities began. I saw Archmage Lacius sitting with Fraladin for most of the celebration. Ciel, Lacius' familiar, was nowhere to be seen. The raven was likely flying high in the sky and out of sight. My accomplishments had become known to a few nobles. I was the center of attention, and many important people dropped by to say hello. I was even given a gift by one of them. It was a beautifully enchanted ring to enhance the bravery I had already shown. Everyone was sad that King Norbert had died. He had been a good king. We all had great hopes for our new monarch, King Gareth. The kingdom of Daria waited in eager anticipation to see what kind of king he would be. My illusion teacher took the occasion to implement a unique type of test. Our class gathered that night to cast entertainments into the sky for everyone to enjoy. I made up a fake cultural reason to get out of doing it. I told my teacher that where I came from, it wasn't appropriate to create such a display so soon after the king's death. I explained that many lands had customs where such an act was considered disrespectful and perhaps even treasonous. My teacher thanked me for bringing such knowledge forward, allowing me to be excused from the test for cultural reasons. My days at the academy were numbered. I only had one more year after this one. Perhaps this was the reason that I started thinking about romance. I was still madly in love with Rosie. I took Rosie to the tournaments to watch the jousting and the sword fighting. It was a very popular form of entertainment. We held hands as we walked around the tournament. There was a lot going on. We watched the bards putting on a show. It was a crowd pleaser. The Tale of Parnassus. The show was a little sad, since all the stories ended with the great dragon Parnassus eating the heroes. Rosie and I didn't mind. We held hands and watched the drama, enjoying each other's company more than the show itself. We had a wonderful time at the tournament and returned to the academy that night. We went to my room and made love. It was very sweet. I was madly in love with Rosie. Whatever The future after the academy held in store and the challenges it would bring, I knew that I would be at her side. My studies in the tower didn't deal exclusively with magic. The royal wizard, Fraladin, was a great example. As the court mage, he was constantly being relied upon to know about the world around him in order to effectively advise the king. Sometimes a wizard's sagely knowledge was just as beneficial as the arcane power. I studied a lot about smithing. The manufacturer of the weapons, armors, and day-to-day items was all around us. I felt that it was imperative that I understand the process. My 5th and final year at the academy was very thrilling. I had been hearing about the Archmage Lacius private library since I first arrived. I learned a way to sneak in. I had been reading about the founding of the academy when it mentioned the library. It was a relatively obscure text, but I was amazed that it spoke so boldly about a secret entrance. I waited until nightfall and went to the lightly used hallway mentioned in the book. After pressing the correct sequence of books, a door opened. I followed the door right into the Archmage's library. The library was very exciting. There was a wealth of information to be had. I wondered why the books weren't available to everyone. After skimming a few of them, I saw why. They were dangerous! The magic involved was intense and powerful. One book in particular caught my eye. It was a book about golem craft. I knew I couldn't stay long, but the book showed how to make a golem that would serve its master forever. And the best part, I had access to the materials from my assorted classrooms. The danger was too great. I put the book back and left. I knew that the book was kept locked away for a reason. It was just too powerful, so I left it behind. My transmutation class was pretty boring, although it might just have been the teacher. We always seemed to be doing the same things, turning stone into bronze, then to iron, then to gold. That might sound like it should have been financially lucrative, but it wasn't. We used to spend hours in order to create the tiniest bit of gold from another material. I think I could have made the same amount of money for the time it took working at a normal job. I knew that transmutation would eventually allow you to turn an enemy to stone or to craft an item into giving it special powers, but that was very advanced magic. We were each given a finely crafted statue of King Gareth at the beginning of the year. They had all been sculpted from stone from very talented artisans. Our task was to convert the stone into ruby, the royal gem stone. I cheated by finding another ruby statue of King Gareth. At first, my goal to find another statue seemed impossible, as the previous year's students had created King Norbert's ruby statues. However, I learned that the stone carver who made this year's statues had completed a few practice pieces. These pieces were converted to ruby by the teacher herself, to be sure that the transmutation process would work on that grade of stone. From there, all I had to do was steal one from her room. The teacher was very impressed with my work. It was a nervous time for all of the students when they reached the end of the 5th year. The courses had been difficult, and although I had learned a lot of magic, I was afraid of what my final grades would be. I remember being called into Archmage Lacius' office to see my final evaluation. Ciel, his raven, sat on a wooden stand in the corner as I looked over my grades. Final transcription for Helena. Alchemy, passed. Conjuration, passed. Divination, passed. Enchantment, passed. Illusion, passed. Summoning, passed. Transmutation, passed. I breathed a great sigh of relief. I had passed all of my courses. I would be graduating and receiving my wizardly robes. I was the first of my kind to graduate from the academy. It was a historic moment. Congratulations, Archmage Lacius said as Ciel watched me from her stand with her black, shiny eyes. I had done it. I was a graduate of the academy. This was a great accomplishment for me, and I knew that I would definitely set off on the right foot for the next stage of my life. I remember packing up my bags, books, and other belongings. The academy had been my home for 5 years, and I was a little nervous about what the future held. At least I wouldn't be alone. Shadow, my dog, would be at my side. Even though I no longer had a schedule or teachers, my education as a wizard was far from over. I would continue to grow and learn for the rest of my life. I had a large decision to make. If I had to decide if I would continue to be a diviner or if I should generalize my studies. I decided to specialize. I would become a diviner. I left the academy and returned to Elmvale, my home village. Blaze, my warhorse, seemed eager to be on the road. My parents were very happy to see me, and they were so proud that I had graduated. It was really good to see Robin again. Rosie and Dominic had traveled with me to my home village from the academy. I was grateful for their companionship. I had a lot to think about now that my life as a student was over. The next logical step for any wizard was to find traveling companions and set out on an adventure. I stayed a few weeks in my village. I knew that this was no longer my home. I tearfully said goodbye to everyone, explaining that I needed some time alone to find my place in the world. I promised that I would send word as soon as I could. I mounted Blaze and left my village. My destiny awaited. We will continue the